All right, so we back up in this thing with another video. An order from the White House to freeze all federal financial assistance. Let's see how far this extends.
Breaking this morning, this sweeping, unprecedented order that puts a pause to all federal grants and loans at 5 p.m. today. This could be trillions of dollars in funding that impacts programs and people in the United States and around the world, things like disaster aid, aid for medical charities, food assistance programs. This all came in a 2-page memo that kind of lacks clarity on exactly how this should be implemented. It has also sparked new debates about constitutionality. A lot of questions here. Let's get right to the White House for CNN's Elena Train, who I know has been digging on this. Elena.
That's right. This is really the latest stunning use of power from President Donald Trump's White House just 8 days now into his new administration. And look, this internal memo that was circulated by the White House Office of Management and Budget says that all federal grants and loans will be halted starting at 5 p.m. today, potentially impacting trillions of dollars in.
The one thing I can say is, like he said, he ain't about to try and make things take a long time to happen. He said, let's do this. And in 24 hours, no announcement to the people, no heads up, no warning, just
spending, and also potentially impacting millions of Americans who rely on this type of funding. Now, I said, this is expected to take effect at 5 p.m. today. That means a lot of these organizations were given less than 24 hours notice of this change, and they have until February 10th to submit reports to the budget office at the White House, and from there, seeking clarity on how this will move forward. Now, one thing that is clear is that the freeze on this is something that the budget office is saying is for organizations that don't necessarily align with Donald Trump's views. I want to read for you what Matthew Vaith, the acting director of the Office of Management and Budget, said in an internal memo. He said, quote, "The use of federal resources to advance Marxist equity, transgenderism, and Green New Deal social engineering policies is a waste of taxpayer dollars that does not improve the day-to-day lives of those we serve." Now, to be clear, John, this memo does specify that Social Security and Medicare benefits are not going to be affected by this freeze. Also, individuals who receive these different loans directly will not be impacted. However,
that's the one thing I was thinking about is federal loans. A lot of students, a lot of college students and young people rely on federal loans to get through the school year. And not only that, just to live. But we'll continue.
However, hundreds of different federal payouts are now in jeopardy, all from, charities to different research bodies, universities, community projects. All of those could be impacted by this move. Now, we've heard a lot of top Democrats sounding the alarm on this. We heard just this morning from Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker, a Democrat. This is what he had to say. He posted on X, quote, "The U.S. Constitution does not grant the president this unilateral authority. In Illinois, we will stand against unlawful actions that would harm millions of working families, children, and seniors." Now, we also heard from people on Capitol Hill who are arguing, again, that Donald Trump might not have the authority to do this. This is what Senator Chuck Schumer said in a statement last night. He said, quote, "Congress approved these investments and they are not optional. They are the law." So a lot of questions, as you can tell, about whether or not this is something the White House is actually able to do. Now, some experts have said that the president does have the authority, at least temporarily.
Quick fashion question. My man's is wearing a striped tie with a checkered shirt. Is that okay?
To put a pause on this type of funding. But again, we really do have to see the details of this because the scope and scale of this directive is so broad and impacts so many different people that there's going to be a lot of questions on this. Now, we do plan to hear from Caroline Leavitt, the White House press secretary, later today at 1 p.m. I expect she's going to get a lot of questions on this, John.
Her first, I think, White House press conference, and I do expect this will be a major topic there. Elena Train, great to have you on with us this morning. Thank you very much. With us now, his defense attorney and former federal prosecutor Shan Wu. And you heard Elena talk about the legal questions here that stem from, say, the Constitution, which I think everyone knows puts the power to tax and spend in the hands of Congress. It's the spending clause that Congress shall have the power to lay taxes and collect them duties, impose excises, to pay the debts and provide for the common defense and general welfare of the United States. That is typically been meant to mean that Congress spends, right?
Right. And not only is there a constitutional issue, but there's also a law that was meant to address this, which does address it, the Impoundment Act. And this, on its face, clearly violates that. I mean, the 45 days was just mentioned within the Impoundment Act allows for some temporary pauses, but the emphasis is on the transparency being required to Congress, that the executive branch would have to set forth the exact reasons. And, the reasons they gave in this memo is just a bunch of campaign slogans like, Marxist, anti-Marxist things, anti-trans issues. And it's very flimsy. I mean, on its face, I think what's interesting, John, is it sounds like it's kind of more, meat to the base, but underneath that is really this enormous expansion, continued expansion of the unitary executive theory, giving the president as much power as possible. So it's definitely headed for the courts.
A huge potential.
And so pretty much what he's saying is, okay, yes, you can pause these things, but in order for them to be paused, you have to step forward with actual reasons and give them to the House, the Senate, congressmen, and let them deliberate and then decide the best plan of action, as opposed to just mandate a freeze and then enact said freeze in less than 24 hours.
Expansion of power here. And I'm glad you brought up the Impoundment Act of 1974, because we can look at that, the Impoundment Control Act. We can look at that one of two ways here, whether or not it inhibits the president, whether or not it's constitutional. But one thing is clear is that Donald Trump knows it exists. He knows there are limitations on what presidents can do in terms of not spending. Listen to this. He put out a video, like a year and a half ago on this.
Hey, come real quick. I want to show you something. Do you want to see the worst sales presentation ever? Check this out. Am I getting close on time? If you...
Thomas Jefferson famously used this power, as did many other presidents, until it was wrongfully curtailed by the Impoundment Control Act of 1974. Not a very good act.
Now, again, in this, it's clear he doesn't like the act, but I imagine in a courtroom, one could say, he knows it's there.
Oh, that's absolutely right. Again, the Trump administration, in my view, likes the legalities of much earlier times. So you're going back to Jefferson. And, that was enacted during President Nixon's period. And, some people have opined that Nixon only signed it because he was too enmeshed in the Watergate scandal to really be able to object to it. But certainly in the court, they're going to say that he's violating that. And unquestionably, what the Trump folks are going to argue is that the act itself is unconstitutional. So that will head directly to the Supreme Court. And despite the extreme conservative majority right now, this is a pretty questionable one because it's a classic separation of powers issue.
It's a classic separation of powers. When Congress decides to do something, particularly if you look at this memo, which the White House put out, it's not saying we want to spend the money on this cause that Congress voted on in a different way or a certain way. It says that we just don't like what Congress decided to do. So that's going against an actual law passed by a majority in Congress and signed by a president, correct?
No, that's exactly right. And that's why under the act processes, they would need to be far more specific than this general idea of, we just think that generally everything's heading the wrong direction, so we're not giving out any money until we approve it, make sure it goes through our filters. But you can't do that. I mean, this is money that's already been appropriated, and the damage is enormous. I mean, even this issue about not going to individuals is fuzzy, because while they're exempting that on its face, there's money that is federal money goes to state agencies to distribute to individuals. So it's very easy to see how it really wipes out a lot of benefits for individuals too.
Again, possible that he does have some authority to do it temporarily. Whether or not he intends this to be temporary, we will see. How far it goes from here, also to be determined. Shanwu, thank you
So a lot of funding has been cut. No one knows to what extent it's going to trickle down yet, because the memo that announced it was very vague. And essentially, the president listed his reasons as being, I do not agree with the money being spent in this way.